Cheap and cheerful used to apply to a hell of a lot of cars. Now it's more cheap than cheerful, especially when you make it a box on four wheels. Now that we all understand each other, do exceptions to this sort of rule apply as we move into 2025? Longtime viewers of the show know well I take a ton of crap in the comments about featuring cars that are either A, crazy expensive, or B, not for practical people. Clearly that is not the case today. Now, why are we driving this? Because I'd say pre-virus, when this thing first came out, we drove it and shocked how fun of a car it was to drive, even though it was designed to be cheap and cheerful. Well, here we are with some changes, and yeah, the front's different, the back is different. They've tried to make it look a little bit different, but really it's about how it drives and some of the bits that go into the way it rides. And the biggest change is the engine. It's almost 10% more horsepower. Doesn't sound like a lot in the grand scheme of things, but 15 more horsepower in a small car like this, we got to find out if it actually does something. And then more importantly, the transmission change. They're getting rid of the dual clutch. I'm not for this idea, and they've gone with an 8-speed torque converter automatic. What does that mean to the practical people? That means it's supposed to drive more like a normal car rather than like hard shifting. So our goal today is to determine if all of these changes, especially the transmission, was a good idea. Welcome to an unusually windy San Antonio, Texas. Now that we have the pleasantries out of the way, 3,181 pounds, or depending on express your weights and measures, 1,443 kilograms. Now this one, it's all-wheel drive, so it's 249 pounds more than that. With that, oh yeah, wow. Yeah, well, you definitely feel the extra power at the top end of the rev band. I'd say somewhere between 3,500 and say 5,000 RPM. So that's the transmission talking. You know how these things were all about DCTs. Really, Volkswagens are all about DCTs. There's a reason why they have them. They're more about performance, yet may impact the fuel economy. In this case, not so much. The fuel economy went up 1 point in only 2 of the 3 EPA measured tests. So this is about making the car feel like other crossovers, feel kind of less German, and that is exactly what they've accomplished. It's, I guess, smoother in shifts. That's the biggest benefit for the kind of people that would own a car like this, and that comes at the cost of immediacy. It's not the quickest thing out there. It's not trying to be the quickest thing out there. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, with today's contestant, a car that exists to be affordable, a car that exists to be practical, but one that is better to drive than most, at least the one that came before it. $24,995. That is a front-wheel drive car. The one we're driving here is not front-wheel drive. If one wants to add all-wheel drive to any of them, it is $1,700 extra. Now, when we look at something like this, what does like bargain basement and cheap and cheerful mean? Well, obviously not roll down windows. I can't think of a car that has roll down windows today, although that would be a nice touch. This has things like an 8-inch screen, wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. It even has a fancy HVAC system. Then there's the middle of the road model. That one's about $28,000 US, and that adds things you wouldn't expect in a car like this, like steerable headlights. I can't really think of many cheap cars that have that, and those can be had with a panoramic sunroof, like a whole, like from here to here, not like the little one you see in most of them. That's $1,200 extra. And then, of course, we have to drive the fancy one, right? This is the SEL, only comes on offer as all-wheel drive, and wow, do you pay for it. $34,695. This one is fitted with one factory option. It's those black wheels, $395. Then the only other thing we pay extra for is the destination and handling. No, not von Deutschland, rather from Pueblo, Mexico, $1,425. Wow. The destination handling on a Mercedes S-Class that is made in Germany is $995. I need to figure that part out, which brings us to a total retail price of this, an affordable practical car of $36,500. $15. Wow. Compare that to my perennial favorite in this kind of like segment here. Believe it or not, the Buick Envista and the Chevrolet Trax both start cheaper than this, about $23,000. You know what? Comments below. If you had to choose between only those three, which one and why? And we've come to the point of the episode where you and I have to become practical, which means Roosevelt drives today. Here, you would think this would be an absolutely dreadful place to be because this is considered an A segment car. What the hell does that mean? It means it's got a shorter wheelbase than most of these things you see out here. This has a shorter wheelbase than, say, like a Nissan Rogue because it's supposed to be a smaller car. But notice, this is where a 6-footer would sit and plenty of room. The only thing I would complain about, it doesn't have like the stadium seating you see in many SUVs where I sit higher than Roosevelt in the front so I could look over him. That aside, it's not supposed to be a fancy place back here. The biggest thing you have is a charger. So this is one of these things that has all of the different spots, so I can do a USB-C down here, and there is just one. Be thankful. Then some of this stuff here, it looks cool in this fancy one. You got the black with the blue to pick up the blue on the outside. But the tactile feel, I mean, it's supposed to be an inexpensive car, so there's that. And then there's a very unique detail. We've got the armrest here, but there is a pass-through. So you kind of have like a ski pass-through you would see, or you could use it as an alternative armrest. Overall, very functional back here. And so we get to the important question, what makes it a Volkswagen? The answer is somewhere between the way it drives and the way it rides, meaning the people in the car with you. Now I could go into the details, the pedantics of the different suspension setup, and there is a fancier suspension in the all-wheel drive models. But really, where the rubber meets the road, if there's a spectrum of like composure to compliance, this is closer to composure, but huge asterisk there for a car that's supposed to be starting around $25,000, meaning this doesn't drive like a Touareg did. This doesn't drive like a Cayenne, but it drives better than a Rogue. That's what makes it a Volkswagen. But again, there's an asterisk here as well. The steering, it's not precise. I don't know what they were trying to come up with here, but I feel like I'm rowing a boat with the steering here. This definitely needs to be retuned. There's something going on here. Now, yes, we could fiddle with the different drive modes, go into sport, and it really doesn't change anything about the steering. Putting aside all of that, there is something incredibly important that's been staring me in the face the entire episode. This does not have the horrific UX of the ID4. That is an incredibly good thing. We saw that it was somewhat fixed in the new Tiguan. I'm assuming like the total redesign of the coming Taos in a couple of years will probably have a derivation of that. But here we make do with knobs. A tuning knob. We even have a knob down here for the drive control and off-road stuff. Now, they couldn't help themselves. There is a touch-sensitive haptic feedback kind of thing for the HVAC. It's not as horrific as in the ID4. Still have the slider here. It's lit up. That's the only hint of super modern VW because the steering wheel controls real buttons. So overall, the inside of this thing, it kind of works better than most other Volkswagens because it still has more Volkswagen-ness to it from back in the day as opposed to let's re-engineer the Volkswagen back into it after making a mistake. So this is my very long-winded way of saying don't try to reinvent the wheel when it comes to the inside of a car. The old way is usually the better way. Moving into today's experiment, this was always that cheap and cheerful recommendation I used to share with friends that needed practical but wanted something with a pulse. Now I get it, I am a broken car guy, I need a rough shifting transmission that aids to even modest performance gains. This surgery, it works. It makes it addressable for more people, which is the goal, but it mutes the whole experience, which brings us to the wish list. The thing that hasn't changed, it's still, in the grand scheme of things, it's a lot of chair for the money. Now it was lovely driving this, the blue one with the panoramic sunroof and all the stuff, but 36 grand, that is a bridge too far. This is all about being a $25,000 vehicle. The only suggestion I would make, how about to get the sunroof, the first stop really is about 30 grand. How about we get one where we can make it 26 with the sunroof? That's really my pushback here. But I'm one man. At this point in the episode, I turn around to you guys to opine in the comments below or via social media. MotoMan TV, all one word. MotoMan TV, all one word. Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And with that, if you found this episode fascinating, I highly suggest you watch our Tiguan tech review. That's a 2025 totally new vehicle. And I would argue it's kind of like the future of Volkswagen. And it's not as like completely groundbreaking. It's just so much, it's kind of like Back to the Future. They're making them drive like Volkswagens again, and I did get to drive that car. You can check out that episode here. Until I see you in the next episode, bis später.